find yourself walking in a grass field, you begin to stop and you experience all the reality that is in front of you. In an instant, time and space has become meaningless because the observer is aware. Now, in 7 steps, as we shall do, we shall cross. Life. By, in a sense, stepping into ourselves. With our first step, we have stepped over the first city of love. With our second step, we have crossed the second city of love. With our third step, we have crossed the third city. With our fourth step, we have crossed the fourth city of love. With our fifth step, sixth step, we have crossed the sixth city. And with our last step, we have come to the 7 cities of love. And he who has forgotten of the cities of love will understand that in man's love for life, he has opened his experience to many greater realms in which all conception is captured within a moment of all moments. So the cities of love are the cities of conception in which the being is observed beyond the human structure. And so the last step, through the grace of natural geometry, is taken within. And so you have stepped within yourself and you have realized the last stage, the last city was beyond any city. And so you have stepped beyond the elusive reality of external form, but not that it is elusive, it is present within a greater design. And so the awareness of the greater design will always make a segmented aspect of it seem meaningless. Similar to how one would take a very great painting and only just show a corner of it. The whole painting is the intelligence of the design. The 7 cities of love is a very abstract idea, and it does have traditional significance, perhaps in many Sufi paths. However, in the poetry in which this imagery originates from, the 7 cities of love are the aspects of your own creation which are at the peak of their co-creation. So in other words, the intelligence that has allowed the moment to be divided is now realizing it can connect those divisions in any way it chooses. And so it is that awareness beyond the form that one is in to see that the subtler planes of their reality are in actuality the dissolution of their idea into the greater knowing that even originated the idea. And you will see the value of what Mr.Within poetically calls the central sun, in the sense that you're no longer asking anything but the center of this reality to communicate to you. And the center of that reality is the origin that is within you. It is the origin of awareness beyond the biological machine, beyond mental circuitry, beyond the apparatus that finds itself limited. For the potential of its intelligence is of a limitless design. And so the pilot of consciousness knows that once he is there navigating, the plane of reality is simply an aspect of himself. you will find yourself to be the moment that is giving color to what is meaningful for you. Once your awareness is there, it is very important you bask in the vastness of your being, and you're simply, it's as if you are not stopping or you're not being still or going into meditation pose because someone's telling you to. It's as if you are just seeing the beauty of life, and it's in such an infinite view that you have to sit down, simply absorb the beauty of your mind. There is a sense of sensitivity to self, which is more than a personality as it is a presence. When we look from above, from the eyes in the sky, we see that humanity is this life form on this planet that has the ability and the self-awareness to be curious. So a life form has began asking questions, and it has developed. When someone sees this, it is simply a matter of the natural design of whether this species should continue or not, and you see nature has decided our existence, and that is what we exist. So it is very important that we know that our relationship is not just with the immediate reality that we are, it's with all that is. And so we cannot ignore an aspect of our reality by thinking that we're only one part of it. If I'm telling you I'm a good guy, that is ignorant. Because the good and bad are different contexts and relevant to different relationships of form and how even space and time are measured. Because that is how man is judging morality. This act is wrong, this act is right. But in essence, once the being becomes aware of form, form is hollow, and so the contexts are simply just kept there through agreement. So your problems are actually kept there through agreement. And so the social reality is actually that when you go in a city or when you go into these commitments of, for example, of being in other realities of others, you are choosing to be in a reality where you have to have an obligation. You choose obligations because that is where your life has led to some degree, but at the same time, the experience that you're required to see and observe. Because then the observer will find the freedom in its steps to be its natural expression. And these 7 cities of love, it is very important to see that the consciousness of man is multidimensional in the sense that visualize a spiral, a 3-dimensional spiral, and this 3-dimensional spiral has a point where it's going down and up, so it's creating its own spectrum, but within its creation it's twirling, and so it's giving itself this ratio of multidimensional senses of appearance, in the sense that the plane of reality is organized through what is given from this organization. So the anarchist was simply throwing himself into the intelligence that would be a lack of responsibility of his form to be formed. And so the anarchists, I find, are simply people who are experienced hunters, but they must realize the anarchy that they feel they need is an internal awareness rather than an external phenomenon. So what that means is you kind of stop trying to ruin things or change things externally that much. You in a sense become aware of why there was ever a need within you, and so you realize it was because of a lack of awareness in which you are formed and solid. Know that anytime you have a problem, there's a lack of awareness because you're fixed in having a problem, having a shape. There are dimensions to your thought, and it requires your self-exploration. And what that means is have fun, because you will drive and reveal the methodologies that work for you. Evidently, there's this 12-year-old, I think, or 14-year-old kid who was at first diagnosed with autism, but then was homeschooled to then be now, I guess, considered for a Nobel Prize or something. And so this kid had a TED Talk, and in his TED Talk, he was very excited. And he came and talked about how his genius was that he took responsibility of his own learning and created and became aware of how he was receiving the world. Each one of us is a unique receiver, so even saying there's 6 types of learning, that is just ridiculous. There is just a unique moment of reception that is you. And so it is self-awareness that really opens up greater view. So when this kid said that it's very important that you recognize and you're taking responsibility for your own learning. So don't think that you need to go to school or you need someone to teach you or whatever. Become interested in your life to a point where you're like, I need to have clear information. And clear information means even more clear than what the senses are immediately receiving. So you're observing life and being curious in that your curiosity and longing to see what this existence really means, you are opening dimensions of your mind which are allowing you to observe anything and the whole part of your journey. So because it has become a journey for you, your memory is simply the excitement of your movement. So really knowledge is not something to then be taken note. You don't take notes anymore. You become the moment that where knowledge is present in any way. It is very important to see that whatever we rationalize or whatever the ant thinks, the way the human being breakdances in the park beside that ant is so beyond the conception of what the ant could visualize. Because the ant is limited to its state of being. So we see that what is the key factor is the awareness of every life form to recognize that just as it has kept itself to be something, it will also let go of itself to, in a sense, be something else, but that something else is unspeakable. And so it goes in the realms of the emptiness of Buddhism and the clarity of the stillness of the yogi who was in meditation for many days in the same spot. Art is the ability for you to communicate and express the totality of your moment by allowing the totality to be expressed. So I suddenly realized the ability of me to look at things in a novel way, to have more of a creative output. That ability came about when I stopped interpreting, because my interpretation was keeping my curiosity low. It's like how I was naming everything and valuing everything in my life was not the true value, so everything seemed dull to me. It's like, gosh, I don't want to do that. That looks boring. Because I was so arrogant. I was so into my own illusion and my own self-talk. But it's very important to observe all phenomena as simply something that can be observed by an observer. And that means that if suddenly someone gets a thought that is unpleasant or a thought that's pleasant, it doesn't matter. You have the ability to confront both. Because your spectrum is in full awareness of who you are. There is that self-awareness, there's that establishment of self into an awareness of self. Recognize that the 7 cities of love are the 7 perhaps beautiful ways which consciousness is aware of itself before it dissolves into a sense of no conception. In other words, we cannot observe it from the bottom of the mountain. It's only the sky that knows the truth. You know, and so it's a sense of letting go that is the next greater wisdom. And that is why many have said, and I've heard, of course, Sadhguru saying that the moment of death is the moment of enlightenment. And perhaps the reasoning behind such words is that is when there is a full awareness of what you are, because you're letting go of it. And so that moment when you opened your hand and suddenly realized that you weren't holding anything, but you thought you were. The unknown is not a source of fear. It's actually what you know and are holding on to. It's the lack of ability of you to confront the intensity of change, which is putting you in a fear and scared dynamic. You should begin being so honest and authentic with yourself. And if you see that you're in a vicinity where there's harsh things, you must immediately just go in a room and be gentle, and through that awareness of your gentle state, guide yourself. So what that means is that you first establish yourself in the calm of perhaps the serenity of just being. So you're just aware of your presence, and as you're aware of your presence, you take the Buddha's advice and you realize that the most ideal state of being for virtuous action is, for example, holding a flower. He recommended this as if walk as if you're holding a flower. So in that gentleness, then begin taking steps to, in a sense, transcend your hardship by very gently walking. So what that means is that many people find themselves in very bad situations, and situations where the consequences are, in a sense, in that devouring dynamic, where they've devoured something that's coming back to devour them. So this dynamic is a sense of self-thought that leads to guilt, which is inefficient technology for your being once you're aware of the clarity that you are. And what that really means is that you realize that if you have walked into a bad neighborhood and you're just in the middle of that neighborhood, you can't freak out, you can't get scared, or you can just bring yourself to the present moment, look around and follow your intuition and your sense of where you must go, just your natural rhythm, and just gently and walk out of that neighborhood. You know, leave that environment of conception, leave that fixture of reality, and so allow yourself the existential allowance that is the expression of your greater vision. Nature is never late and nature is never limiting itself. It is when man conceives himself to be much greater than his environment, in which the environment seems like it wants to take him, it wants to devour him, you know. We must have a sense of awareness and a sense of gentleness to reality and human consciousness in the way that we are managing it, not as being an idea man running, you know, not as being just this little idea in the head of, you know, in your head running around, but simply as being a very omniscient observer that is allowing you to prosper. Because if you are an idea, usually you're too covered with guilt and feeling you deserve something. For example, you're like, oh gosh, I'm such a bad person, I don't deserve this. And so this is a complex, this is something that has been projected in how you feel reality should be. But the most important thing is that, what would life do? If you had just committed a crime and you just ran, and the judge, it wasn't a courthouse, they just put you in a forest in nature. And so there was nothing aside from just life. What would you do? You would simply observe that you would judge yourself. And so when a being judges himself, it is through that self-judgment in which he's becoming honest and authentic to see his clear view. So aspects of his self that are in a sense, the smudges on the mirror are in a sense being polished. And so that being realizes, why was there a need for me to hurt or in a sense break something, an externality, to receive an internal satisfaction, when I could have just simply sat here and just been in my presence, in my compassionate collective being, collective consciousness, in which the individuality is embracing the environment. And it is simply the way that you're working with yourself that opens up these dimensions. I would like to share with you something very beautiful, and it's a literary work. And it's actually a quote I want to share. But when I'm speaking about 7 cities of love, I want to also give you the proper context in which it was introduced. And it was back in around, I think, 800 to 1,000 years ago, where in ancient, I think it was Persia, in ancient Persia, they had these mystics, they had these authors or these poets or these Sufis, these spiritual men who were just putting profound poetry and just ecstatically dancing in a sense of existential drunkenness, where they're not drunk on alcohol, but they're drunk on just being alive. So Attar is one of the most famous mystic poets of Iran, actually. And he's the one who's spoken about. In a sense, he's referred to the 7 cities of love. So I'm going to tell you a quote by Rumi. And for those of you who know Rumi, he is also a very, very profound teacher. So this is what Rumi says. And Rumi is a very conscious being, very realized being. And he says about this other being named Attar. And he says, Attar has roamed through the 7 cities of love while we have barely turned down the first street. And what this means is that Rumi, this self-aware being, was saying that the dimensions, the experience that this individual has had of existence has been as if he has roamed the 7 cities, and just our experience of just a sense of simple nirvana or enlightenment is just, it's as if we have barely turned down the first street, as Rumi says. And so this imagery is important, guys, because tradition is a flame, it is a beacon, it is what is inspiring you. You might not, in a sense, have a sense of significance for your roots, but you are, just as you want to be fruitful in this life, you must know the soil you have come from. You must look at your ancestry. You must also observe the beauty in how you are designed in your culture. So do not think that the way you are raised is a flaw. It is an inconvenience. It is actually a gift, because once you observe it, you realize that is the essence in which you find that it's like this is what your DNA was trying to tell you. My friends, the 7 cities of love are within you. For beyond those cities, you are within them. Remember yourself through the ability of your greater confrontation. You are not the limitation that is lost to how the shape or the circumstances. You are an unshaped observer, and so once you realize the ability of the creation, to see the creator it is, just as Meister Eckhart has said, the same eyes that I see God are the same eyes that God sees me. You become a self-communication in which your greatest conception is dissolving into the knowing. And it is perhaps close to the knowing of that apocalypse there, where you see after you have confronted all there is to confront, the most intense experience of existence, you are put into an eternal weave, in the sense that you dissolve, in the sense that the minute this talk ends, I have never spoken these words. And it's an elegance in how a being is conscious, because this life has much to offer. This life is an offering. It is a blessing. And once you are no longer in opposition with it, you will realize that it is your greatest ally. It is your greatest movement. It is you. You will see that another person being alive is the core of the essence of that life. And so you no longer have a judgment based on externality. It's as if you are knowing people, you're knowing things internally, and it is a very nothing knowing. So it's as if your knowing is there regardless of how much forms come to convince you. And it's as if in that moment you have become an aware presence, an aware moment of existence with a knowing that is the greater empty observance of the form. And so once you are there, it's as if you are no longer trying to find things in life. Life finds you. It's like life celebrates your awareness because you have learned to look beyond the self. And perhaps it could be as beautiful as that moment in that movie where a great person passed away, and in that passing of that great person, it's as if the whole cosmos was just celebrating in the way as if, well done in how you have lived. We are our greatest moments, and in our allowance, we enable ourselves. This allowance is an existential allowance. So sometimes your thoughts, your circumstance might seem as if they are not giving you the permission, but you are not getting the permission from your thoughts or your circumstance. You are the permission of all that is in your awareness. And so beyond ideology, there is the true essence of a limitless sky, because there are no clouds. For all has faded, including the ambitions of a blind man. For once you're found within yourself, there was never anywhere else you could be. Much blessings. and sing as the 7 cities of love are breathed. Namaste.